Hi, everyone. My name is Courtney Frueauf. I am the Provider Recruitment and Solutions Manager here at Practice Match. I've been at Practice Match for over 8 years, coming up on 9 years now. I worked in support, worked on the training team. I've been an account manager since 2019 and recently entered into this hybrid role focusing on account management as well as our professional development recruitment courses and our class offerings that we will be ramping up next year. Today, in our webinar, we'll be talking about avoiding recruitment nightmares, common pitfalls in recruitment, and how to avoid them. Recruitment in healthcare, it's more competitive than ever, especially with physician and provider recruitment. Every single day a position sits open, and it's not just a vacancy, it's lost revenue, and it's added strain on our staff. When recruitment isn't done well, it does impact our patient care, our employee morale, and even retention. It's all connected. Now, on average, a physician generates $6,517 per day for your hospital or for your health system. Now, multiply this by the median time to fill a position, a provider position, which is 126 days per APPR. That actually comes to $821,000 and some change that we are losing per physician opening. 821,000. Now multiply that amount by the number of provider openings, well, we'll say physician openings at your hospital or health system. So we're looking at millions of dollars in revenue lost. So today we will look at the most common pitfalls that we are seeing at this moment in time in recruitment, and more importantly, how to avoid them. So this is just a snippet. You don't have to sit there and do the math. I did want you guys to see what your company, what your organization is losing 1 month all the way up to annually per specialty physician opportunity that is vacant. So again, this is costing our organizations thousands and sometimes millions of dollars in lost revenue. And that having a poor recruitment process, that's also impacting patient care and our team morale. Okay, pitfall number 1. Inadequate candidate sourcing. Oh, sourcing. This is often where recruitment challenges actually begin. If we're relying too heavily on one avenue of outreach, or we're waiting for candidates to come to us, or we're just posting and praying. This is inadequate candidate sourcing. Our top organizations that we work with, they are diversifying their sourcing. So they're posting jobs on different job boards. They're using digital marketing efforts, passive candidate outreach, and more. We're not just waiting for candidates to come to us. It does take 7 to 10 different touch points to get a passive provider candidate to finally respond to your outreach. And that might be increasing, and it has been increasing year over year with those touch points. So what we need to do, we need to think beyond those active job seekers. So our active candidates are those candidates who are actively looking for an opportunity, whether it's their first opportunity or whether it's their dream job and their second opportunity or third. Your next hire might be someone who isn't actually looking for an opportunity yet. Always put yourself in candidate's shoes. Would you be open to an opportunity if it was presented to you, even though you weren't necessarily actively seeking a job? So always put yourself in those shoes. If someone approached me today and was like, hey, I got $1 million job for you with work-life balance. Now, obviously that's a stretch, but just as a little example, it would be something that I would consider and have conversation about, even though I'm not actively looking for an opportunity. You will never know if someone would be interested or not unless you reach out to those candidates. So how can we avoid this pitfall of sourcing inadequacy? We recommend multiple modes of outreach. So you're thinking about all of your databases that you have available, all those sourcing tools that you have in your toolbox. We do need to be emailing, texting, calling candidates, attending the proper career fairs, physician and APP conferences, hosting our own events. Maybe we do our own happy hours or we offer lunch and learns. Digital marketing, mailers, all of these are different modes that allow us to reach out to passive candidates. And again, thinking about our 7 to 10 different touch points. I personally, in my experience, I like to begin with a very narrow search based on who my ideal candidate would be. So thinking about my job requisition and what we need, what we're looking for, I will plug in as much criteria into my sourcing tools as possible to result in that quote unquote ideal candidate. It might be a small number, but this is my number one list. These are my number one candidates. I will then reach out as many ways as possible to those candidates, depending on what kind of contact information is available to me. For example, if they have a phone number, I know I can call it, I know I can text it. If they have an address on their profile, I know I can send them a mailer and I know I can geofence them. So looking at the contact information I have and reaching out multiple ways, and I will let you know what I like to do. If I have those few ideal candidates, I will email and call them right away, and I will personalize my outreach, my messaging based on what I can see on their profile. We also need to be building our pipeline or our community network of candidates. Building your pipeline, it's imperative and it is often overlooked. These might be candidates who they are viable, but maybe it's not the right time for that candidate, or maybe it's not the right time and place for your organization. You love the candidate, but let's save them for later. Let's put them in our community network bucket or our pipeline bucket and keep them for later. These could also be candidates maybe who've previously applied, but they were not accepted in the past due to lack of experience. Maybe they have that experience now. So let's revisit those candidates who've previously applied to our jobs. I also like to look back on our silver medalists. Again, maybe those candidates who didn't quite have a certain skill set or experience, but you loved them as a person, thought they'd be a good cultural fit, and you kept them for later. Keep them in your pipeline, keep them somewhere that you can continue to reach out and stay at the forefront of their mind. This might even be medical students. It's never too early to start recruiting and start building those relationships. And it could be candidates who decided, okay, well, I'm not ready to start work. I want to continue on to fellowship. You can house these candidates somewhere. I like to follow up with these candidates every few months or so, and I highly recommend that you include this in your best practice and that you create a best practice process for your pipeline candidates. So reach out every few months to stay on their radar and to be top of mind for when they are ready for their next job or their first job or ready to make a change. You do want to use your technology, of course, such as Practice Match and other sourcing and recruitment tools that you have. So hopefully you have a list of those somewhere that you're aware of what you guys all have in your toolbox. I also like to use AI and social media. This helps us improve our reach, improve our messaging. It helps us save time and streamline our processes and outreach. And of course, automate whenever possible. So at least I know within Practice Match, you can automate a full email campaign. You can have the system do that for you. And I know that next year, 2026, we are going to be expanding on that drip campaign and how much you're able to automate. So you'll be able to automate more emails, text follow-ups. It's going to be glorious. Help you guys save time, set it and forget it, right? And once you've attracted that talent, the next step is to keep communication strong throughout the entire process. All right, pitfall number 2, poor communication. Even the best candidates can lose interest or even believe you are no longer interested if that communication breaks down. Continue to check in once you've attracted that talent. Continue to check in, provide follow-ups in that recruitment process, and be transparent. Make sure you know the candidate's individual communication preferences as well. So you should be asking, would you prefer I reach out via email, text, phone call, and even letting them know about your outreach frequency, how often you plan to follow up. Upfront transparency about the entire process is a must. What the role entails and any benefits that are included. This will help you avoid any surprises. It keeps the communication line open between both parties, and it also makes the candidate feel like they're able to be more honest and open. And this is just going to benefit you, your organization, and the candidate. All right, so how do we avoid? Again, like I said, make sure you know what mode of communication the candidate prefers. Set clear expectations. Who are they going to be talking to? What is the next step? What are the next steps? What do the timelines look like? And I already mentioned this, let them know your frequency of checking in. So are you going to be reaching out every 3 days, every 4 days? How does that look? And provide a follow-up, even if part of your process is halted. You have to let the candidate know that things are still moving along, even if it's a little bit slower. So even if maybe you're waiting to get a candidate a contract and it's taking a little longer than expected, reach out to that candidate. Let them know, hey, just taking a little bit longer. We're going to get it over to you. I expect to send it over by Friday or by Monday, whatever it might be. We don't want them to think that we've forgotten about them or we're no longer interested. We also need to make sure our job descriptions are very clear when it comes to roles, responsibilities, schedule, benefits. Being open and transparent about these things up front, again, helps the candidates and you, candidates weed out jobs and helps you weed out candidates that might not be viable. It also is a big time saver for both parties. Again, if and when you're allowed to, provide information on what the schedule looks like, what kind of procedures they'll be doing, what does the pay structure look like, what about bonuses, relocation, CME. These are all things that if you have that information and your leadership is okay with it, we highly recommend including that. Just starting with that transparency right off the bat, saving a bunch of time. Good communication is only part of it. Efficiency matters as well. Pitfall number 3, inefficient screening and interviewing. A lot of times we're seeing long or disorganized interview processes, which can be a deal breaker for many candidates. I've had candidates who said, never mind, I'm no longer interested. It's taking too long. I've had another offer that's perfect for me. Healthcare talent, they oftentimes do have multiple offers, especially our physicians and our APPs. They are hot commodities. And if you're taking too long to screen, to schedule, you're likely to lose them. Even when your sourcing and your outreach are going well, these little inefficiencies during screening or interviewing cause our strong candidates to slip through the cracks. We're seeing some organizations that also don't have standardized criteria throughout this process. So each interviewer or each person who's included in the interview, they have their own idea of what makes a quote unquote good candidate. So for example, one person on the recruitment team may focus on years of experience. Maybe somebody within the physician leadership is looking more at credentials. Maybe someone else is looking at personality or cultural fit. So different questions are happening or occurring throughout the interview, as well as different formats. Candidates are they're asked completely different questions, and it makes it really difficult to compare candidates fairly. So if one candidate has a list of these 10 questions, another candidate has a totally different set, how do we compare? Subjective decision making, we need to make sure our feedback doesn't sound like, oh, I had a good feeling about this person. I really liked this person. Or something like, they didn't seem like a good fit. We need to be able to include specifics, and we need to be able to include measurable reasoning as well. So how do we avoid these inefficiencies? Well, we do need to standardize our processes. We need consistent scoring. And we want to train our interviewers or maybe consult everyone who's a part of this interview process. Our goal is to get them through as quickly as possible, get those candidates through the process as quickly as possible and fairly. So make sure you create a structured interview process using the same core questions for every candidate in the same role. And of course, you can tweak based on specialty, but we still need some structure within our interview. You can even develop a scoring rubric. So rate each answer against very clear criteria. For example, a 1 to 5 scale for communication, leadership, clinical decision making. And I do have an example. I did create a rubric that I can send to you after the webinar today. I did create one. I can send it your way, and then you can tweak it accordingly. Just shoot me an email. We want to make sure that we're training everyone who's involved in the interviewing, even if it is our leadership. Make sure everyone understands how to evaluate those responses from the candidates and use the rubric effectively. Something else we see are post-interview collaboration meetings, making sure everyone who's been a part of this interview is aligned with their feedback and making sure that we're using those scores and interpreting them consistently across the board. Use those video conference platforms, of course, Teams, Zoom, those kind of tools for virtual interviews. I think most of you probably do, and to better determine if the candidate should move on to a site visit. But these virtual tools have been amazing. They got really big, of course, during COVID, but it speeds up your process, or at least the initial part of your process. Recruitment doesn't end when an offer is accepted. This is where our retention starts. All right, pitfall number 4, ignoring retention in recruitment. I know how tempting it is to make a candidate fit into a role or pushing a candidate through because the job just needs to be filled. I get it, been there, done that, but this will hurt you once again, and it's going to waste your time and effort and the candidate's time and effort. Recruiters and recruitment teams should partner with their HR and their leadership to understand why people leave and address those issues during recruitment. It can be not fun, a little painful to hear why people leave, but we need to know. It's just going to help overall recruitment and retention. And always keep in mind, we're not just looking at experience, skills, and ability of these candidates. We're also assessing the cultural fit, community, and we're looking to see if these align with what the candidate is looking for. These providers And these physicians are making really big decisions and potentially relocating. So, other than the job, we want to make sure that this location, this community fits what they want, what their family wants, anyone who's relocating with them. And just remember, hiring is only half of the equation. The real ROI comes when our employees stay, when we retain those candidates. So how do we avoid this? Retention starts during the recruitment process. The best way to keep our great providers on staff is to make sure they're a great fit from the start. So let's go beyond the CV, go beyond that resume. Ask about their long-term goals, their preferred work environment, how they define success. This is going to tell us whether they will thrive in your organization and culture. If someone's looking for rapid advancement or urban settings, but you guys are in a rural setting, that misalignment, it will eventually show up later and result in turnover. So we don't want to, what's the saying, put a peg through a round hole, something or other like that. I do have an example, and if you've worked with me before, I'm sure I've told you the story. I had a candidate who was interested in my Upper Peninsula opportunity, which he was the only one that I ever had that was hot on this opportunity, and he was all about it. He wanted to go to the UP, and in the process of scheduling his site visit, he calls me and says, "Well, hey, I can't go. My wife told me no, we can't move up there." So I had failed to find out who was relocating with him and what kind of community or setting the entire family would be interested in. Candidates cannot align with what they don't know. So again, be transparent about your mission, your culture, and what makes your organization unique. We do have a physician focus group here, and something that they tell us that they like to hear about is your community impact. So while compensation, bonus structure, that's all great and important, they also want to know about your impact on the community. Use your interviews and your digital presence to tell that story. So what does your team value? How you support that work-life balance and what makes your providers stay. Authenticity always matters. Make sure you guys are consistently highlighting your values and you're projecting that as well. You need to feel just as passionate about your mission, about your values, about your organization as your candidates that you're recruiting. In our physician focus group, they did note, our candidates, our attendees did note that community impact is a factor in how they decide to move forward with an opportunity. And retention does need to be built into the entire recruitment process. Remember, it starts from the beginning. So once again, collaborating with our leaders to understand why our providers are staying or leaving and use that data to shape your recruitment messaging and your offers. So you can have exit interviews, of course. So why are they leaving? And you can also include stay interviews, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It means that they're staying, you're retaining them, but why? We want to know the good and the bad. And you can also send out pulse surveys. These are typically very, very short and sweet, infrequent surveys to see why your employees are staying. And then you use that in your recruitment. Just making sure our recruitment and retention teams are aligned, and it might just be one team. You might be the recruiter and you might be in charge of retention as well. We want to make sure these are aligned. We're not just filling roles, we're trying to build longevity within our organization. And while we're often focusing more on physicians, another area that's commonly overlooked are our advanced practice and allied health. Those are getting big here. So pitfall, number 5, neglecting those APPs and those allied health roles. Nurse practitioners, physician assistants, and those allied health professionals are vital, and we all know this. I think this is becoming more and more common. However, recruitment for these roles often gets less attention. These positions can be just as hard to fill and just as critical for patient access and satisfaction. I do like my nurse practitioner better than my physician, so I definitely see her and I request her. APP opportunities, they're becoming more and more, and it does help us increase our candidate pool and who we can reach out to. So how do we avoid this pitfall? Our same strategic tools that work for physicians, such as branding, sourcing, retention planning, these do apply here. They just might be slightly different. Like I said earlier, you can never begin networking or recruiting too early. So get in with any of the training programs, any medical schools to begin that brand awareness. Offering things like complimentary lunch and learns, didactic courses to provide value and not just to push your opportunities or say, hey, can we throw you a pizza party and talk to you about our jobs? We want to really offer value to these programs. So build those relationships as well and begin to become more than a recruiter. Become a resource for these candidates. So if they have questions on how to write a CV, how to interview for a job, things like that, be that person who helps them there because even if they don't join your org, they're going to remember you and they're going to pass your information along to colleagues. And once again, showcase other values in your opportunities. Things like healthy work environment. I'm trying not to say work-life balance as much. So healthy work environment, personal well-being, autonomy, being able to feel like you have a say and actually have a say in what happens in the organization, and growth opportunities. So finally, let's talk about something that ties all of this together, the data. Pitfall number 6, lack of data-driven strategy. If you are not measuring it, you can't manage it. We don't know what's going on if we're not measuring something. One of the biggest pitfalls in recruitment today is flying blind, making these decisions on the spur of the moment without of the data to back it up. Way too often, recruitment strategies are built on that gut instinct or tradition rather than metrics. And in a very competitive healthcare market, that's extremely risky. So, how do we avoid this? Data is always going to help you see what's working and what's not working, where you're losing candidates, and it's going to help you adjust in real time. So, if we track things like time to fill, source effectiveness, interview to offer ratios, or even time lapsed between our recruitment steps, retention metrics, ROI on tools. These are all things that are going to help us improve our processes, reduce time to fill, get the candidate across the finish line. Making sure we're looking at our sources that we have, all of our tools that we have, which are providing the most ROI, or which provide the most candidate engagement. Candidate engagement is just as important as hires. Where are we getting the traction? Also, if we're looking at time lapsed between each recruitment step or milestone, as we like to call it here at Practice Match, where are those bottlenecks or those roadblocks? So for example, maybe you start analyzing this data, tracking this data, and you see between the interview, the site visit, and the contract received, it's, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, something crazy. That needs to be reduced. So digging in deeper into why is it taking so long to send out the offer? What can we do to reduce that time? That is something you can then focus on. Where are those candidates falling off in the process and why? Maybe immigration is taking too long, so they go somewhere else. But we don't know, we can't fix it unless we know and track it. So you have to have some sort of applicant tracking system, some sort of ATS, because ultimately our data does turn recruitment efforts from reactive to strategic. Fun little stat here, across healthcare, organizations using data to guide sourcing reduce cost per hire by as much as 25 to 30%. So that is huge. And in conclusion, recruitment nightmares, these are preventable if you focus on sourcing, communication, efficiency, retention, and of course the data. So take some time this week or next week. I know it's Wednesday, so we only have a couple days left. Maybe next week. Where are those gaps? What is one change that we could make right away? Just identify one change and see how that enhances and improves your recruitment strategy. Even small improvements can save us time, money, and improve our patient care. And recruitment in our world, in our industry, it's never easy, but with the right strategy, it doesn't have to be a nightmare.